Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation of Conflict of Generations, Container Microservices versus Classic. My name is Jan-Ole Kastens. I'm a management consultant with Cassini Consulting. We are an IT management consulting company that is located all over Germany. Helge and I are from Hamburg, so we feel very much at home here. And well, I've been doing projects for over 15 years now in the areas of IT operations and infrastructure, and I collected a lot of experience introducing microservices and container environments to legacy IT environments and organizations. And this will be what our presentations today will be all about, and I will let Helge introduce himself.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Helge Hildebrandt. I'm a senior consultant working with Cassini. And yes, we are going to share our deep experience that we experienced in a project ago in Berlin. And it was really challenging, and we really want to share this with you.
All right, so what are we going to talk about? It was a bit hard for us to squeeze all that which we wanted to convey to you today into 35 minutes. So we picked a few topics from our experience report that we'd like to share. And these are facts and figures first, then some architecture aspects. Then we would like to talk a bit about operational things, logging, and roles and responsibilities. And hopefully at the end there will be some time left for you guys to ask some questions. So first things first, some facts and figures. We were hoping to do a bit of interactivity, but I think we've got a little problem with our online survey too, so I have to skip that. I'll just confront you with the results.
And we hope you share the same.
So the idea was to ask you guys first and then to show you what the rest of the world is thinking. It's just a few general numbers about microservices and container platforms. So I think this is a research and a survey that has been done by Dimensional Research. It was from 2018. They asked over 350 senior development stakeholders from companies that had over 500 employees, things about how they were using their microservices and container applications. And one central message that they were able to deduct was that over 91% of those companies were already using or planning to use microservices and containers. And next thing is they were asked how did the usage of containers and microservices change during the last year in your company, and over 90% again told them that they are increasing their usage of microservices. So microservices obviously is the way to go. And what I think is interesting is most of the senior stakeholders said they were doing this because they had the desire to be more agile. And that was about as specific as they were going to get. Next thing was they wanted to improve scalability, which I can believe, and performance, and all these things. Well, pretty interesting. And if you are a manager and you are told, let's do microservices, let's introduce a container platform, then we will be more agile, and we will have more performance, and we will have more scalability, and everything will be better. Usually the management says, all right, let's do microservices. How hard can it be? Well, we found out, and we would like to share some experiences. We did a project not so long ago, and there was a project that had a runtime of 2.5 years. Over 300 people were involved, and that project started with an already very complex IT environment. We had over 60 physical servers, over 1,000 logical hosts. We had high SLAs to conform to high availability requirements, and over 10 suppliers that were doing development work and operations work. So it was already very complex. And we were faced with a decision that a container platform should be introduced. And that with that came 5 new external service providers, 15 big new applications were to be developed on that container platform using microservices, and 5 of those existing big applications were to be redeveloped using microservices. So that's the project that we'll be referring to when we're talking about the experiences we had. And the first topic I would like to talk about is the architectural aspects of that. So basically, that the decision to move from a legacy environment to container and microservices was motivated by us. What we did not realize at the time is that these decisions can take a very long time. And basically, what the management understood is that we were moving from this to that. So for us, that meant that we were moving from the left side to the right side. And it wasn't really a move, because we already had, this is just a selection of what we had. And everything that is on the right side was added. So our already complex system just got a lot more complex. And we all had the feeling that we're not on the way to solve problems, we were creating problems. And especially for our IT operations management, that was a real challenge. Because support and maintenance was a thing. We had an obligation to warrant support and maintenance for everything that we had, software, hardware, and all of a sudden there was a lot more software, hardware from different suppliers. The testing effort, because there was a really nice waterfall staging system with the old environment, which didn't go away, of course. Well, it exploded, really. Know-how management got a lot more complex because you had a lot more new technologies and procedures to follow. And security and patch management was a bit of a nightmare, because when you're working with microservices, a lot of open source, you get a lot of updates, and you really need to deploy often, which when you usually deploy once a year proves to be a bit of a challenge. So the architects of the company decided that they needed to do something about that. And they went forth and said, all right, we need to consolidate our architecture. We need to reduce the diversity of all the technologies that are currently being used. And they failed, because they never were really empowered enough or enabled enough to do that. And well, we asked ourselves, why is that? Why are the architects telling us the right things to do? Why is nobody doing it? And well, we came up with a few solutions. There's a lot of text here. We will make the slides available to you. So the only thing that we really need to focus about is we introduced architectural guidelines and development guidelines. They really weren't there in that form before. They existed, but were quite rudimentary. We made sure that there was a team that consisted of developers and operations guys that regularly met with the architecture team. So we integrated them with development and operations. They regularly met and developed these guidelines. And also we made also sure that they had some kind of interactions with the product management guys, who were regularly introducing new features and new feature requests. Some of you may know SAFe, and may be familiar with the term architectural runway. That's basically the thing that we try to maintain and to foster by implementing these guidelines. And we made sure that there were checkpoints in the project management procedures that our client had, in which those architecture guidelines and development guidelines were enforced. And how all that was well, experienced in the operational organization, well, that will be something that Helge will be talking about.
Okay, thank you, Jan-Ole. Yeah, operations, that's my part. I was taking part in that specific area of the project. And Basically, we were facing in the project 3 phases, and in these 3 phases, we experienced several specialities, let's call it. And just to have the pictures here, as I look around me, this we would like to have at the moment all a bit as far as I mentioned the temperatures here. So, but it was in the preparation phase really a situation for everybody in the project where things were not so clear. I will come to that a bit later. Then implementation phase, I will come to that image especially later, and run phase. So that were the 3 phases we had in our project. In detail, our challenges that we had to face in the preparation phase. First thing, already mentioned in the beginning, a late decision for the implementation of microservices on a container platform means you started already with something and had already first design ideas, and then there was the decision, okay, we go for something really, really new. Big challenge. Additionally to that, the next challenge, not enough know-how in the project among the teams about microservices and container. And we will come to this again and again through our presentation, the late definition of rules and guidelines, because the development has already begun. And so if you try to do this while you are already working, that's really, really special. And not enough training, because everybody was in the project with workload and so on, and then training is always sacrificed. Implementation, the image of somebody running away or trying to escape, a lack of transparency between the different teams in the big project, so not everybody was aware of everything that was going on. Not enough cooperation, especially between the development and operations area, which then led to something like this, somebody escaping from his roles that he should fulfill. Rules and guidelines, even if they were there, they were not really enforced. And then the testing effort was way too high because in the project we didn't have the, let's say, degree of automation. And you can imagine within testing phases, a lot of people being involved and even manual processes around, really a challenge. Then in the run phase, as you can see on the image, we were a bit slow because we had a lot of open issues from the previous phases, which we need to tackle. So we were not really in the mood, let's say, in the way to get the DevOps. We were really working in silos. Operations was not fully on board. Remember the one trying to climb the wall. Then the processes within operations were not really adapted to the new environment, and therefore, for instance, for updates, way too slow. And again, still the problem with the lack of knowledge. Again, here we have a slide with a lot of topics, and as it is really hot, we try to focus on a few ones. Yeah, define the rules and guidelines is one of the things that we learned from this project in the preparation phase. So this is what we want to give to you as early as possible. Implementation phase, really, we have to ensure, and this is what we did, we come to this later, to get better integration between the development and the operations. And if we do this, we have the chance in the run phase to focus on optimization and really implement something like Kaizen, continuous improvement, whatsoever. Really do this if you have the chance to do so. Yeah, that's it from operations. And now I hand over to Jan-Ole for logging. Next challenge.
Yeah, logging. Why did I pick that subject? It's usually something that you think about very late in your project. And well, that was quite a problem because we also did that, and we faced some challenges. As I told you, this was a very complex system. So when doing debugging, we were relying on very good quality log files. The problem is that those log files well, in the old world, these were locally kept log files, and we had now a new container environment. a container platform where everything came from standard out and was being dumped into an Elasticsearch database. And there was also a log archive server, which was being used by some of the systems, but not all of them. So the problem with the local log files was, well, sometimes they were simply deleted because, well, the file system was full. And the guys thought maybe we don't need them anymore. And when you were looking for those log files, maybe they were already rotated away to a file system where you didn't have access. Or they were simply ignored because nobody knew that they were there in the first place. So was quite the quality that we needed. With the container platform, many of the operators still didn't know that there are no log files in a container platform. Usually, everything is being dumped into standard out, and then there's an Elasticsearch database, and everything is there, but it's not very structured. And the same happened in the log archive server, because all the files that were being transmitted there were just transmitted there, and you did end up with a big pile of data which you could not really use. So all that really slowed down and complicated our debugging process. And we had to do something about that. So what we did was we made sure that there was a logging concept which made the developers and the operations guys categorize the information that would be put into those logs. And then we tried to separate the logs according to the informations that are kept within them. And at last, we made sure that all the logs were being transmitted to the archive log server. And we basically did the same thing with our container platform. So we did some categorization, some separation. Transmission was not necessary because we just switched everything to be put into the archive log server as well. And on the archive log server, we started to look ahead. We started to create some reports in anticipation of what we might need when we are doing our debugging. And we made sure that all of this went into a logging concept, and that logging concept became part of the development and architectural guidelines. And it was a requirement to implement this before you started to write a single line of code or of test. And well, after doing this, our debugging process improved significantly in terms of time it needed until you find something. All right, that's it for logging, and they will talk about the roles and responsibilities now.
Yeah, thank you, Jan Ole. Wow, it's me again, and it's still not cooler. Roles and responsibilities, the challenges that we had to face throughout the project, again, this time divided in these areas. Architecture, as we described in the beginning, was really a tough topic. It was not on time, the know-how problem, and so on. So this ends then up in something like a useless stare into the ceiling. Development, with the late introduction of the rules for the developers, on the development guidelines specifically, you end up in a pile of bits and pieces, and you really have a lot of work to follow up and get this harmonized. Operations, as they were not really on board, they're still in their old environment, they were still with their old processes, habits, and so on. Testing, as I said before, really not to the degree of automation that would have been perfect. And so with a lot of manual things, with a lot of organizational stuff around, ends up like this, at least partly. And of course, also some security issues when security was also not deeply involved from the beginning. Yeah. So that was the challenges. What did we do to face these challenges? Yeah. Architecture, what did we do? Yeah, we defined the basics for the architecture, and we recommend set standards in the beginning. And what we did in our project was to empower the role of the architect, get management backing for him so that he really could go like this sometimes and say, okay, this is the way we go. Yeah, to keep things together. In the development area, let's say, what we did when we had the development guidelines was really to challenge the developers with this and really to check, yeah, and by this get already the developers on board so that they follow, that they understand the guidelines, and then we work together. Security, what did we there? Our recommendation is, as you can see here, define the requirements early, and as soon as we got the backing and the guys on board, we did with them, and we introduced tools like OpenSCAP and Black Duck for checking codes and libraries and so on to get away of these security issues. Operations, our recommendation again, and what we did, I will show you a bit later, encourage DevOps, really get the buy-in of the operation guys, especially in such an environment where we were there. And test, I don't have to emphasize this more, and automate, even go if you have the chance to test-driven development. So what did we do for the roles and responsibilities, especially for the communication? We set up a series of meeting circles, of boards, yeah, to get a better understanding of everybody, to share things. One was the architectural board that came together, where the architect hosts this and to explain his vision, share this. Then the DevOps forum, this was one very successful part, I must say. We really got a buy-in from the operational people because they were then in the very position to say, okay, now we are part of the project and now we understand what you guys are doing here in the development. Yeah, so this was one of the really, I would say, fundamental issues to get a better understanding and the way through DevOps. And then, as we were not in the position to have everything automated, we had a test board because all our tests that we had were quite, full of effort and organization, and this is even easier if you have a meeting with a test board where everybody is on board to share things up front and you don't spoil the test. Yeah, that's about my part.
All right, so wrap up. There are three, I was told that when you're doing a presentation, there's only three things the guys that are listening to you will be able to remember. So these are the three things that we want you to remember. First message is when you're introducing a new complex system into an already complex system, you need to have a good architecture, and you need to really empower your architects or your architecture will fail. We saw that firsthand, and after implementing the means and giving the architecture really the power and the tools to create a good consolidated architecture, things got along. Next thing is, this sounds like a very old message, but I feel like I have to tell my clients regularly that you really need to integrate development and operations, because we see so many customers, they are still operating in silos. And if you do that, you will be surprised about all the nice effects that you will be able to see. And you need to define architecture and development guidelines, and you need to enforce them. And you need to do that early in the project, and you need to do that integrating all the stakeholders from development, from operations, from product management, and from the architecture team if you have such a dedicated team. And you need to plan ahead. You need to do this before you start coding. So that's the three key facts that we wanted to convey. And unfortunately, our interactivity tool is still not with us. That's it. We still have a few minutes for questions. All right, everybody is quite warm.
Sir?
Oh. I'm sorry, I couldn't really understand. Do we have a microphone to give to him?
So maybe I jump in if I understood you right, sir. It's the integration between the development guys and the operations guys, the different mindset. Whoops. No accident, please.
And now my question was more like aiming for a point you've been mentioning earlier about how important it is to early in the project to define certain guidelines and rules on how to proceed. And at the very beginning, you came up like with a charts of like motivations for various companies to like get into a more microservice-based architecture. And one of the top prioritized answers has been
agility,
becoming more agile. So like having as an important part being like predefined rules, but trying to be more agile at the same time might seem to be like concurrent aims in a way.
I see where you're going. Well, sometimes it may sound like that, but usually, agile doesn't mean that there are no rules. And if you have a very big system with many technologies and the teams, even if they are cross-functional, are operating quite autonomous and independently from each other, and they're all implementing, in the worst case, completely different technologies and using different frameworks, your system gets very, very complex. And most of the time, you do not want that. So you have to provide some guidelines and set some constraints with the choices of technologies and frameworks that will be used for implementing the features. And that can also be something that everybody is still involved in. You can still be agile and continuously develop those guidelines and those rules and enforce them. It does not necessarily mean that there is someone in his ivory tower deciding what will be used and everybody has to follow. That's not what we did. We integrated them with the guys from development and from operations, and together they provided a basis for everybody. It was a bit of everybody had to give a bit, but in the end, we had a lot of less trouble with a consolidated architecture.
Okay, thanks.
Right, any other questions? All right. Well then, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.